The views and opinions expressed in these historical letters that may contain vernacular used in the World War II era, the post-war era, and the Cold War era do not reflect the views and opinions of any of the individuals involved with this project, including, but not limited to, the podcast's creators. Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning, Allison.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm cold.
Cold.
Well, we're supposed to get in a storm.
Hmm.
We're getting a storm here today. And it's a little chilly, and it was spitting a little snow earlier, but we're supposed to be getting a deluge. I guess that doesn't really count because it's we're supposed to be getting a onslaught. There you go.
Okay.
An onslaught of snow. Or it could be 2 inches,
Yeah. I think we're going to see it a little bit tomorrow. It's supposed to head its way east across the state to be a little icy. But that's a great thing to mention right out the gate here, Jamie, because for our listeners, welcome everybody to the Love Sweetie podcast, episode number 87. Remember the good old days. We were hinting about this episode at the end of last week. And for people who are getting ready for Christmas, when this airs, it's going to be 3 days before Christmas Eve. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody who's celebrating the holiday. We have some very special content for everyone today, and it's not as long as usual, but that's because this is just such a perfect story from Sweetie that we wanted to provide this to everybody. It is the big letter that she wrote on December 8th of 1950. So it is the December content. And I think it's just kind of the perfect thing that if you listen to this podcast while you're doing other chores, maybe you're baking some cookies for the holiday.
So, but I think this is a beautiful kind of just standalone little letter because we do have some updates and some things. She mostly recounts the storm.
Right.
And it is an epic retelling. It's a cool story. I really enjoyed it. I was like, sometimes when I read, I'm really into something. I just want to get to the end. So I like kind of skip words. And I was like, I had to slow myself down and go back. Yeah. But I really like this one. This one was fun. And I really like the fact that we kind of have a storm today. I love how this, or we're getting a storm today. It's just kind of comes together.
You don't want it to be a storm like the one Sweetie tells. No.
And it won't. No. But what she had to deal with was crazy. It was crazy.
For sure. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you, everybody, for checking out the episode today. If you could please like, share, and subscribe to the Love Sweetie podcast on YouTube, we'd appreciate that. Click that little bell icon to get the notifications about new episodes coming out every Sunday. If you're on our audio channels, there's going to be a little visual to see at the end of the episode today, but you're not missing any pictures in the middle of the episode here. Everybody listening in on our audio channels, if you could please click the relevant buttons, download, leave reviews, all the good stuff. You guys on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you know what to do. We appreciate all of our audio listeners. And of course, check out the website at www.lovesweetiepodcast.com. All right, but Jamie, Sweetie's got quite a story to tell. Now, just for people that missed the last episode, the last piece of content that we had was, well, Sweetie was really upset at Jean. We're not going to get into that today, anybody who is waiting for that. But Sweetie wrote a postcard, and in it she said to Jean, I suppose you heard about our storm. I'm going to write a letter about it soon, so shall not include the details here. Well, time to get into the details.
Yeah, let's jump into those details.
There we go. County Line Road, Hatboro, Pennsylvania. December 8th, 1950. Dear Mama, Papa, Sister, Frank, Florence, and Jean, I am enclosing a write-up of the storm. It is pretty good detail. though I couldn't possibly write it all if I tried. I am grateful to Sister for the card she sent for my birthday, and for our anniversary, especially as it is the only one we got, though we did get a letter from Mama on a pretty little card that I chose to regard as an anniversary greeting. Though this is our 7th anniversary, I choose to remember our wedding with the usual sentiment, and must confess that I believe even Lou forgot it. I got him a card and put it in his jacket pocket for him to discover at work, and I believe he had forgotten it until he came across the card. He bought one and brought it. But I'm certain, though I didn't suggest it, that he had forgotten it too. He did last year. Time is going on to Christmas, and we're faced with the usual problems. Lou has the duty on Christmas Eve, the night we've always put our Christmas tree up, and so I shall have to do that alone, I guess. We've worried about what Santa Claus will bring to Louis, and have decided to buy secondhand from the boys across the road an electric train set. It is a very elaborate thing, and my conscience is giving me a lot of trouble over it. We couldn't begin to buy it if we were buying it new, but there is so much to it. Station house, signals, lots of track with switches. It is something us kids never had, and I wonder if it is the thing to do to give such an elaborate toy to a kid like Louis. Elizabeth is, as usual, going all out, and I get to feeling like the poor relation we are. Besides, I always get a yearning to be home for Christmas, and don't get into the spirit of the thing until it is almost too late to enjoy it. I think Lou will be off Christmas Day, and that we will go down to Elizabeth's for the Christmas dinner. Marguerite and Joe will come over, and no doubt Mr. and Mrs. Brown will be there too. I don't feel right about buying gifts for the Graham clan and not for my own family, though there are more Demarees by far than there are Grahams. I console myself by saying the rest of my family has too many to buy for too, and so they won't feel too badly. But it isn't a very consoling thought. I'm glad that Papa got some help in laying the blocks for the garage, and I do hope he has recovered from the flu. Mama, I hope your ankle is much better. Our weather reports of the Midwest say you've just had a heavy snow. It is cold here. We had a heavy rain last night, and today it is turning much colder. I did drop Mama a card yesterday saying her letter had arrived, but I shall not answer it now, as it should be answered since I've taken so long to write about the storm. I've also had a letter from Jean, and one from Frank, and Papa, and cards from Sister that I should take individually and answer, but shall put it off yet a day or two, as I've sort of let things slide, and must get to work. I'll write again in a day or two, but we'll let this do for now. Love to all of you. Sweetie. Yeah, so she starts this letter with basically a quick note. The whole enclosure she's about to give is the recount of the storm. But we get a couple little updates here of things going on. If anybody missed it, episode 86, Chester building the garage. That's really special. So, first of all, Chester letter. So always special when there's a Chester letter. But for anybody who missed it, something to check out. And then she's giving the Christmas Eve preparations here. We learned that Lou's going to be working at the base over at NAS Willow Grove on Christmas Eve. But not much to say, and now she's about to rewind here. And I think, Jamie, we can just dive into the story. Remember the good old days. On Friday, November 24th, I scurried around cleaning and cooking and shopping to make ready for Grandmom Graham's long-promised visit and rest from the routine of diapers, cooking, etc. And late in the afternoon, Louis and I took the car and went to meet her train in Hatboro. She seemed quite pleased at the prospects of a weekend in the country, and I was determined that she should relax and enjoy herself. She said she had never eaten chili, and so I prepared a big batch, and when Lou got home, we sat down to eat. She remarked when she stepped off the train that it looked to her as though we were due for a storm of some kind. It wasn't cold, and she said she didn't look for snow. Not being much of a weather prophet myself, I didn't give it much thought. She enjoyed the chili, and we sat and watched TV and chatted until about 10:30, when we all went to bed. She preferred to sleep on the davenport, as it has the goose down and feather cushion, and would be most like her feather bed. I got out plenty of covers for her, and she seemed pretty comfortable. I woke up 2 or 3 times in the night and heard the wind blowing up pretty strong, and covered Lewis up and sort of looked around, but went back to bed until about 5:45, when I woke up to hear the wind really blowing hard, and it was pounding rain on the windows. I got up and turned up the heat and went out into the kitchen to make coffee and keep quiet, but see that the water wasn't beating in around the kitchen door. I decided not to make the coffee, as it was early and probably would be cold in taste warmed over, so I picked up a magazine and glanced through it and just watched the storm. I decided I might as well be doing something, and so decided to bake a pineapple upside-down cake, which is a favorite of G-Mom's. I had everything measured out and was ready to start mixing, and then decided I'd get a headache if I went much longer without my morning coffee, and so put it on. It was just beginning to perk, and the wind was howling harder, when all of a sudden I saw a brilliant flash of light and heard a muffled boom. The lights went out, and looking at the clock, I found it was 8:05 a.m. Well, that put an end to our breakfast, but still I wasn't worried, for I knew the neighbors with phones would notify the electric company, and it wouldn't be long before repairs were made. Lou was up when the lights went out and was dressing. Lewis had awakened and gone and got in bed with Daddy and stayed there snug and warm. For a while, at least. G-Mom slept soundly on the davenport, and for one who says she hears every noise in the night, I was surely surprised to see her lie without moving, while the wind howled and rain pounded on the windows so hard it sounded like hail. I looked out several times to make sure it was not hail. I thanked our lucky stars we had bought storm windows for the first floor at least. Just how much they saved us, we'll never know for sure. But we don't have storm windows on the upstairs, and when we went upstairs to check, we found rain bubbling in between the windows and coming in the ventilators. We hadn't checked soon enough, and the water coming in went down on the inside of the walls and wet the living room plaster some. We laid rags to absorb it, and Lou nailed many thicknesses of newspapers over the ventilators to slow that up some. We have no storm doors, and the rain pounded with such force, and there was such heavy rains, that it came in at the bottom of the kitchen door in a regular stream. I was kept busy wringing rags upstairs and then dashing downstairs to wring them out in the kitchen. Rain came in around the cellar windows and ran down on the floor, making puddles, and we knew the drain would soon be filling up, as the ground became saturated, and so Lou went downstairs and worked to get our homemade sump pump working. All right.
Oh, see, I just love this. I just love this because, well, first of all, it's like, she's like, oh, I'm going to do my little routine. I'm going to make my coffee and do the little things and do. And I just like that.
I'm going to make a cake.
I'm going to make a cake. I should be doing something. I'm going to make coffee. Oh, I totally like related when she's like, I need my coffee. I'm going to get a headache. I'm like, same. Same. And I love like just the offhanded harbinger of the storm. Got off the train and was like, oh, I think that we're due for some weather. Not snow, but some rain, maybe. Oh my God.
What is this thing where people are like, how's the wind going? I don't know how to do it, but I always wish I knew. And it's like, can you just tell? Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you've lived as long as G-Mom Graham has, and you have that experience under your belt, she also might just have an inkling and an inclination, like a natural talent for it. But I did want to point out too, she had just put the storm windows up not that long ago. Do you remember?
Right. Yeah, I actually just went back to that letter. So that happens in episode 85 in late October. That's the Up to Doylestown episode. If you missed that, everybody, that's a great episode. We get some interesting stories in there, but for a paragraph, and it may have seemed mundane at the time. She's like, it was a real challenge because Lou's not home. She puts in all the storm windows in the downstairs herself. That's paying off, that foresight to do that. The other thing was G-Mom Graham. She's like, she usually doesn't sleep through anything, and yet she's just out, which also G-Mom Graham is exhausted at this
That's point. What I was gonna say.
She's so wiped out, it doesn't even matter. She's so tired of taking care of Dit's kids and Dit's house and Dit and everything to go with dit in the holidays. So she's just like, I need a vacation in the country. What is it, hailing outside? She's out.
She's like, is there a kid I had to change their diaper? No, I'm good.
Yeah.
I mean, but she needed that.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that she probably was like, I'd rather be here.
Right? Like, torrential downpour, let's go. Like, uncertain house that was just built, let's see how it can weather this thing. There's a storm coming, let's get out. Yeah, it's
They were
fun.
made of tougher stuff. I'll tell you what. Where are we at right now?
Oh,
Okay.
man.
So, and then, but they don't have a storm window, and we've seen pictures of the house. We have little pictures of the house, but
Yep.
and so they only have like smaller windows upstairs, but apparently that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's coming in and it's making a mess. And I don't know like what kind of what they'd have to do to repair that kind of stuff if they just drive. And I'm sure if plaster gets wet, you really
It's a mess.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
But we are just getting started.
Yeah. Here we go. Meanwhile, outside the wind was blowing like nothing I've ever seen before. The people next door who put up the fancy fence saw it blowing back and forth so that the post holes were so enlarged that they might well have blown out and come hurtling over toward us. He got out and put up some braces on our side and on our lawn, so that as the wind blew it was pretty well propped up. I thought at the time, for someone who has been so unfriendly, he didn't seem to think a thing of pounding big stakes into our lawn. Later, though, I realized that he might have saved us much destruction by bracing his fancy fence. I must hand it to G-Mom. She would under usual circumstances have been running from window to window, wringing her hands in anguish. I have never seen a storm come up at the old family house when she wasn't shaking with fright, and no doubt she was frightened this time too. But with unusual composure she got out her little work basket or box with yarn and made some little pretties to be sewn together to make a carriage cover. Louis isn't usually afraid, and because G-Mom seemed quite composed, he watched her making the gadgets and kibitzed as I went from rag to rag, carrying an old pan along with me to wring into. We were hungry, with no breakfast, and the chili seemed a long way away. Finally, when I was getting headachy and Louis crossed from lack of food, Lou took the car and went about a mile up the road to a hamburger stand and bought some coffee and brought it home. I fixed sandwiches with lunch meat, and we were at least relieved temporarily. It got as dark as evening time, and the winds didn't let up but long enough to take another breath and then start again. We were concerned about the new greenhouse across the road and looked out often to see how it was standing the wind. One moment it seemed to be intact, and the next moment we looked, the whole end closest to us was gone. And then with succeeding gusts, row after row of glass would go out. The wind would catch in the open end, and the whole side of the roof would raise, and then come down. Lou put on a jacket and hat and went over to see if he could help, as they tried to rope it down. The boys are such good help, and they did get it roped pretty good, but the wind ripping through laid some of their plants low, and it seemed there was little they could do to prevent further damage. Still, they were lucky, for their 17-year-old Jay was on a ladder inside trying to secure something when the whole end went out. If he had been a foot or two closer, he might well have been decapitated, as that double-thickness glass could have finished him in that wind. I was still wringing rags, and at first our thoughts were, by gosh, I've never seen anything like this before, and as the day wore on without let-up, it changed to, my lord, will it ever stop? There would be some lapse in the rain, but the wind kept on in hurricane speed and force. It would begin to grow lighter, and we were hopeful that it might be the end, but after seeing it grow lighter and darker and the rains resume, we decided we could only sweat it out. The plaster in the living room was growing wetter, and so I set myself to thinking what could be done to stop the deluge upstairs. Finally, I hunted out an old plastic shower curtain that Elizabeth had given me some time before, and calling Lou from the cellar, we put it out the top of the window and then pulled it in at the bottom so that the rain and the wind plastered it to the outside of the window, making it rainproof. I berated myself for not thinking of it long before. It sounds relatively simple just to write it, but before we could shut the top of the window, open the bottom, and grab it in, the wind had caught it, and it was sailing out about roof level, while we stood there in the deluge, waiting for it to come back down. We gave up a time or two and closed the window to wait, and then when it did come down and we frantically pushed up the window, swollen from the rain, it was again sailing merrily off. I used a curtain rod to try to snake it down, and before we were through, both of us were soaked to the skin, and the downstairs plaster got wetter and wetter. But once we did get it done, it solved our upstairs problems. Downstairs, I kept wringing rags until my hands were nearly blistered and were sore. Ugh, my child. G-Mom frantically made little doodads, and I confess, there was more than once I began to wonder if our roof would hold, through such blasts, as that wind was making against the house. The house soon grew chilly, and we hunted sweaters and jackets to keep warm. We used water sparingly, but soon Lou had to go and drain water out of the tanks via the outlet in the cellar. The refrigerator, which I had so carefully defrosted the day before, was giving no protection for the expensive party meats I bought for G-Mom's visit. Like Jean so often does, I was planning to put the big pot in the little one, and not only relieve her from cooking the meals, but give her some special ones.
That makes me so sad.
Yeah.
She was really putting effort into, doing something nice for G-Mom.
Yeah.
And everything got ruined.
It did, but they finally figured out how to stop at least that upstairs problem. And she describes this like big tarp that they're working with to try to cut that down, but they can't do anything about the downstairs. So it's just running back and forth, upstairs, up, downstairs. And it's like Lewis is also like kind of running around. You got to provide a distraction, but G-Mom's there and she's like, I'm just going to keep making things. And she's not panicking, which again, I think she's just so exhausted at this point. She's like, what are you going to do? Like even G-Mom's given up.
She's like, no, this is way better. Like, I can handle this.
Yep.
This is not nearly as bad as and 2 kids.
Yep.
Like having to take care of a whole house.
And then the other big thing is, every time you have a tornado or you have a hurricane or you have big storms, you're always told to get away from the windows. And then there's a greenhouse, which is entirely composed of glass. And what does Lou go out? He runs out to go assist the Rieselmans across the way. And I can't even imagine. I have like these images in my head of trying to rope down the roof, essentially, from it being ripped off the top of the greenhouse. And we get this image of the glass flying and Rieselman's son out there coming down off the ladder just in the nick of time, or being 2 feet out of the way of a really, really dangerous accident out there. And then all of the destruction, because we remember in a previous letter, Sweetie had just helped them harvest so many chrysanthemums so they could pay off. The Rieselmans are paying off the debt from building all of this. And there goes.
I mean, do you think they had like insurance or anything?
Maybe a little. It's tough though. Like it's yeah, I don't know.
That they just got, like, this was all things that they just put in, and here it is. And I often wonder about that. We've always thought about getting a greenhouse, but you can get something small, a little sturdier, and plastic, or something that's not glass that isn't gonna break as easily. And then of course it has to be replaced. Like, oh my gosh. Well, yeah, but like the fact too that you brought up that Lou was like, I need to go help them.
Yeah, immediately.
It wasn't even a question.
Yeah. Oh. But the story continues. Lou, on one of his trips to Rieselman's, was discussing what we were doing without. He said to Mrs. R, "You people are lucky. We're really suffering." Mrs. R, in redhead style, bristled and said, "How are you suffering?" And Lou said, "Well, we're without our television." And so we were. Louis was suffering from the confinement, and often we wished for TV for entertainment, and to break the monotony of just getting cold. Towards night, the rains left, but the wind still continued high. It let up enough that Rieselmans hung some canvas in the broken end of the greenhouse, and had they had electricity, could have heated the greenhouse and saved the crop. At night time it got cold, real cold, and we were without any warmth or anything. I got out my wedding candles so that we might have a little light. I got out some of Lou's wool socks and put them on over Louis's socks and mine, and we bundled up in jackets and coats. Finally, about 8, we went over to Rieselman's, who at least had some heat, as they have a coal furnace. We sat up thinking surely the electric crews would be out soon. Rieselman stayed up because if the current came on, they might save some of their plants, and we sat up because it was warmer there than at home. Finally, Lewis fell asleep on my lap and everybody else fell asleep. Finally, Rieselman's went to bed, and I put Lewis into bed with G-Mom at Rieselman's, and Lou and I sat and slept in chairs in their living room. During the night it was bitter cold, and we were both miserable, unable to stretch out, and colder than all get out. We called the electric company at intervals. The man who answered the phone rather irritated me because he seemed so bored and uninterested. I guess now it was because they had had so many calls, but I could visualize him sitting in a warm office well fed and without an inkling of how inconvenienced and cold and hungry we were. So I gave him a hard time, told him all we were doing without, and asked how come it was taking them so long. And when he gave me the sad little story they probably gave to everyone else and finished up by saying, "You'll have to be patient," I came back with, "It is nearly impossible to be patient when you're cold and hungry." I guess now I shouldn't have been so hard on him. For that morning, which was Sunday, we decided we'd keep warmer in the car with the heater on, and so we bundled in and went for a ride. And for the first time, we got an idea of the damage done and how lucky we were to have gotten by with just water in the house.
Ooh, so they did take refuge at the Rieselmans.
Yep.
And I think Lou, saying to Mrs. Rieselman, well, we don't have our TV. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I so relate to her. I feel like she's probably we're probably really similar people. But they were nice enough to house them for a night so that they could at least be a little bit warm.
Yeah,
but
neighbors coming through for neighbors. The one helps with the greenhouse. The other one says, "Come on over. We have the coal heater." How important. It just reminds me, there's some neighbors, I don't know their names, and that's kind of shameful in my mind. I'd want to get to that sort of relationship whereby if something were to truly happen, at least, you can knock on the door, more than maybe to ask for a cup of sugar. It wouldn't be that kind of an emergency. But in an emergency, it's good to know, the people that you're nearby and having that relationship that they've been building throughout since they moved there is now really being, it's really being effective to get through the worst of it for them. And then Sweetie has this phone call to the electric company. And she's like, wow, that guy sounds really bored. And I bet he's super cozy in his office. And she's got this really bitter attitude. But we get the cliffhanger from Sweetie here that says on Sunday morning when they start to drive, because the car's warmer, makes sense.
It's probably more comfortable.
Yeah, maybe find some food, something like that. And they start to head out and to see the general area. And they're like, oh, yeah, there's something else going on.
My brother-in-law works for a power company, and he was a lineman for many years, and he still works. And so whenever there was a storm and people would complain, I mean, I know, and I hope that other people too. They're doing everything they can, and and the conditions that they're working in are incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And when you're and so I mean, there's been times I'm sure we've all been without power. There's been I remember when we were first married, not too long after we bought our house, that we had power out for a whole weekend, and we stayed there bundled in front of our fireplace, just burning wood and having to put wood on there every couple hours to just make it through the week or the weekend. So I can understand her frustration, but I also know on the other side, and please everyone know, those men are just heroes. They really are. And to do the things to do that job and to be out there in those conditions to try to get you guys power. I always say a prayer for the linemen every time we have our power outage.
Oh yeah.
And I can understand her frustration as well.
Yeah. And she, in hindsight, when she writes back after what she's about to describe, she's like, yeah, it wasn't what I was thinking at the time.
Right. Yeah, she definitely was able to see. Yes, and so now we are going to get an idea of the damage done by the storm.
Yeah. Trees, enormous old trees that had been standing for years, were just uprooted and lay with roots and all pulled out of the ground. Trees fell on houses, shingles were blown off, Lawn furniture was blown to pieces. Trees fell on wires, and oftener than I like to remember, wires were hanging and dangling in the breeze. Some roofs were blown off, and furniture and furnishings were ruined. Windows were blown in. Well, just all the things that might happen, happened. And though we were shivering cold and hungry most of the time, I couldn't help but thank my lucky stars. Once in a while, I heard G-Mom mutter something about our all-eccentric house, but she took it good-naturedly. When she got the train home Sunday night, we were all sure the electricity would be on by bedtime. The high-hat neighbors just took their 2 kids and moved in lock, stock, and barrel with their grandparents not far away, but far enough away that they had heat and electricity, and they loaned us a little kerosene burner, like Mrs. Butler's. We hunted amongst our antiques and picked out a couple of kerosene lamps that would give a little light, but our clothes picked up the fumes, and we were soon having headaches from it. Sunday night we sat in our living room with a little kerosene burner giving about as much heat as a match, and bundled up in coats, etc. Louis fell asleep on the davenport, and Lou decided he was as well off where he was, and so we set the alarm for every 2 hours and went to bed ourselves. We slept much better and were warmer than when we sat at Rieselman's, and when we awoke Monday morning, still no electricity. Lou had to go to work that morning, but they let nearly everybody go home since the men were needed at home. But he brought back many tales of the storm during the brief time he was there. One man's roof blew off, and every stick of furniture he had was ruined. One man's wife went out to shut a door to a shed or something, and the wind caught it, and with the old kind of lock, nearly cut her arm off. The high fence around the base was laid flat in places. Outdoor advertising signboards were blown everywhere. Well, I've never seen anything like it. Monday stayed bitter cold, and the kerosene heater barely warmed the room enough that we didn't see our breath as we spoke. We watched for the electric linemen until our noses were pressed flat, and Rieselman sang a dirge for their lost crop, and with it hundreds of dollars of plants. G-Mom, who was once more in the nicely heated warmth of Elizabeth's, called often to see if our current was on, and mourned each time we said no. We could make coffee with the kerosene heater, and Mrs. R. gave us a can of sterno to use in heating soup, etc., but it got pretty tiresome, and I began to wonder what it would feel like to have my feet warm again. When I wrote the card to the folks, we were shivering with a cold, and when we went to town, and I got out of the car to mail it, I saw women looking at my wool socks over my stockings, and then look at each other with a questioning look, and I turned around and smiled at them and said, "You'll do most anything when you're cold and without heat," and walked off. Little Louis hadn't had his clothes off since Saturday morning, and was somewhat surprised to find I did undress him and put PJs on Monday night, when the current came on. We went out to eat Monday night, wool socks and all, and when we came back at about 6, the lights were on. We cheered as though we'd struck gold, and believe me, gold wouldn't have been more welcome. All the time we were huddling and doing without. We were reminiscing. Remember this and remember that? Well, all I can say is, remember this. The good old days may be remembered fondly by some, but give me the modern conveniences, heat, lights, and plumbing. But please, Lord, give me the electricity to run them.
G-Mom, so G-Mom got the heck out of Dodge on Sunday night. She's like, later.
Mm-hmm.
But she was, I like how so G-Mom, her old house was not all electric.
No, it was not.
So,
no, it was
so you
older.
wouldn't have this problem where she would be, without heat and stuff in such a storm.
Yeah.
And that is like a kind of eggs in the one basket kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
When we lost power, we had electric, but we had a gas stove. Mm-hmm. So I was still able to cook dinners, and we didn't leave it on and keep warm that way. But the hot water heater also was hooked up, that I was able to take like a hot shower, hot bath.
That's good.
So
yeah,
when it's all electric.
Yeah, it's too much, and a lot of these homes are still, the older homes in this area at this point in the 50s are still coal heated. in one. And we saw that with the Rieselmans. And we do have to give one little shout out to the neighbors that are always like very standoffish. And they're like, well, we're not going to be here. Here's a kerosene heater. Yay, you did something. So,
Well,
you
and
know,
they put the fancy fence. I love it.
fancy
Put fancy
fence.
fence. You don't have any problem putting snakes in my yard. Oh well.
Mhm.
But you see, that's what I really love about her.
Yeah.
Is that she'll take the time to think about things and be like, oh, actually, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Or actually, this was actually a
Whatever.
better way. Thank you. You know what I mean? I like that about her so much.
Mm-hmm.
But they got their power back after a huge storm,
Mhm.
and they were spared
A
a
lot.
lot of the destruction that took their neighbors' furniture. It almost took one woman's arm. It took another man's roof. Like,
Yeah, the destruction was really, really major. We have to remember this whole time that this is going on. And while the men are being sent home, the Korean War is actually, it's still happening, right? So the Korean War is going to be going on and on and on. And for them to dismiss the men at the base that are on active duty, this is an extremely large base. And they're just like, nope, you got to be at home. The other big thing is the newspapers. Usually during wartime, the headline news is always what's going on with the war. Not that Sunday. Absolutely not. This storm, Sweetie gives a taste of the destruction. And when she says, thank my lucky stars, and she might not have seen this paper because it would have been hard to deliver the paper and all of that havoc. But the front of the Philadelphia Inquirer, I'm going to bring it up on that Sunday morning. This is Sunday, November 26th of 1950, so that everybody really understands what happened and what this was. And it could have been even worse than what she described. Monster storm. So for our audio listeners, I'm just going to read the headline here from the Philadelphia Inquirer on November 26th, that Sunday. I'm sorry, so Sunday morning, November 26, 1950. 78 die as the fierce storm lashes the east. Winds rip Philadelphia. New Jersey is hard hit. Some of the pictures are hard to see because they're taking them. There's not a lot of lights. The lights are out. So a lot of the pictures in the subsequent papers that follow this, they're very dark and blurry to actually get a look at. But just looking at the article here and what was written in the Philadelphia Inquirer, Pennsylvania suffers loss of millions, utilities crippled. So it says one of the worst storms on record, driven by winds of hurricane force. They kept talking about the wind. Swept across the eastern states and Ohio yesterday. Ohio was also affected. So this is a huge, wide storm, hitting Philadelphia, New York, and other metropolitan areas and causing at least 78 deaths. And this is when the storm has just ended. So, it's going to be trickier after that. Property damage was mounting into millions of dollars. Communications and travel were disrupted. Whole towns were isolated. New Jersey counted 17 dead, Pennsylvania 16, and Ohio 9. So
wow.
That was the range, really. Philadelphia was blasted by powerful winds that flung hundreds of trees and power poles into the streets. Windows were smashed. 600 persons were left homeless in the Chester area. It's Chester County, Pennsylvania. The Red Cross set up 10 shelters for refugees in the Philadelphia district. Part of Delaware Avenue was underwater as the Delaware and the Schuylkill rose. Snow started falling here intermittently after 7 p.m., and the temperature dropped 9 degrees within the next 5 hours. Crashing waves isolated Atlantic City and broke through bulwarks and other South Jersey resorts. It was the worst storm to hit New Jersey since the 1944 hurricane. So this is a hurricane-level event in the winter. More than 1,000 families were evacuated from homes in flooded shore areas. Violent wind and rain lashed New York City, cutting off electricity to 407,000 houses and crippling the area. Tides rolled a mile inland on Staten Island. The storm tapered off at about 6:30 p.m. Snow piled up to 30 inches deep in some sections. So they didn't get the snow portion, but it was also that. Tides rolled a mile inland on Staten Island. Bitter cold stabbed into the south as far as Florida, endangering the crops. Pittsburgh, so there you go, Jamie, on your side.
On my side of the state.
Pittsburgh was buried in 20 inches of snow, and steel operations were curtailed. National Guardsmen were called out in Ohio to help Cleveland dig out of the deep snow. And the images here on the front page, what we can see of them is the trees that were uprooted. Sweetie noted that. And then the wind hurling a car against a building in Atlantic City in New Jersey. So
Holy
just
this was a very large area.
yeah, wide, big region.
I mean, the entire state of Pennsylvania, because it was
Mhm.
on the west and the
Yep.
east.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. So and then the National Guard
Right. Mhm.
was deployed, which is that is why we have them for
Yep.
these kind of situations.
Right.
So which is great. So but man, here we are. So 17,846 soggy patrons. Yeah.
Well, but football.
But football. Okay, so football. I see it's football. So my turn. I want to read it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, courage is classic. I just have to read
Yep.
this part.
Mm-hmm.
The valiant 17,846 braced themselves against the wind and sloshed through chilly rain to see what, down through the years, is the truest sense of the words, has become a Philadelphia football classic. At any rate, the courage of the soakmen on the field and the dewy customers in the stands as what the heck is that? The Ithacans?
The Ithacans, Cornell's team. Yeah.
The Ithacans and the Pennsylvanians met in a damp football drama. Mm-hmm. So they had the football game, which of course they did. Well, we were talking about this, and I'm like, it's Pennsylvania. Football's like a religion here.
Yeah. It's the Eagle territory. Welcome to the Philadelphia football fans.
And then so who won? The Ithaca.
Yeah, it looks like Ithaca won over Pennsylvania.
Over University of Pennsylvania.
You can't score too much because of the winds that are going on. Why I knew this game was going on, Jamie, is because right above it, all right, the article directly above there was a football game was 100-mile-per-hour winds, batter New York. Right below it, 600 homeless in the Chester area. That's directly out. Evacuation by boats. So the whole thing's about the storm. But then I saw this, and I'm like, wait, what are we talking about? A game here? So they didn't score much because you throw the football in the air, and then the wind's 100 miles an hour, and it interception.
I was gonna say it's 13-6. So Pennsylvania scored a touchdown and missed that extra point.
Yeah,
probably because the wind went like this and took the ball, right. And then 13, like that's probably like probably a touchdown, extra point, and then maybe a field goal. And so and if Ithaca was making field goals, then they deserved to win. Sorry,
well, maybe the wind was blowing in their direction.
Maybe they kicked it over here. They figured out the formula. Like, kick it that way. It'll go in.
Priorities. Yeah. Everybody's got priorities.
That's amazing. That even through that, they were like, no, we got to play this game.
But the juxtaposition of the paper is so crazy because like everything else is like tragic, destruction, everything else, but the football game.
nearly 18,000 people were like, no, we're cool.
We're good. Let's go, you know.
I wouldn't go, like, if I had tickets to a football game and it was like started snowing or something, I'd be like, let's just stay home.
Right.
Never mind.
Oh my gosh.
I don't want to go.
Stations are flooded, running out of beds in the hospital. But the football game, I just on the front page. Never fear, everybody. This is like, you know what? This would be so easy to see that there would be something like this today, and there would be this big article about how the Eagles played, you know, like a home game.
But yeah, so this was a crazy, crazy storm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They got through it, and you know, going back to her letter, I love how she kind of ended it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's like, you know, the good old days.
Great.
You know, they were great. It was wonderful, but give me the modern conveniences.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I'm right there with you, sweetie.
Yep. And that is where we leave Sweetie in December of 1950. She's getting ready for Christmas, 1950. We don't get the story, obviously, yet for that. We will get that in next week's episode. We'll leave everybody with that. Thank you for listening in today. We hope everybody's holiday plans are going well.
But everybody stay warm.
Yep.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.